Hello, everybody. Welcome to next episode of Disruption Talk by NetGuru. My name is Paula Steinwald. I'm a product manager, and I'll be having the pleasure of hosting this episode for you. And today with us is going to be Miranda. Hi, Dar.
Hello. Thanks for
Hello.
having me.
Sure. Dar is a VP of Product Management DailyPay. And today we're going to talk about building the right product, which I think is super exciting topic. I think a lot of focus has been on building the product in the right way. And at some point people figured out that this is actually not enough for the product to be successful. And today we're going to talk about why is that. How are you feeling there about the talk today?
Oh, I can't wait. Excited.
So when we've been preparing to the talk, actually one more theme came out, and it's about demystifying what product management really is about. There's a lot about what it is in theory, and we think that it's quite different from what it is in reality. And this is also going to be something that we'll talk about today. So very excited to have the talk. I hope everybody's gonna have enjoyable time. If anybody have any questions, please post them, and we're going to read them through while we talk. Okay. So there, I really like to start with asking people who work as product managers how they started. I know that this is not, the type of job that you dream about when you're in kindergarten, so like I feel like everybody's ending up here in different way. I wonder what was your journey? Could you share a little bit?
No, it's a great question, and what's really interesting. You're right. I didn't. This is what wasn't what I was dreaming about when I was like in grade school, right? I had other aspirations, which luckily didn't pan out. But I've been doing product since before it was called product. You have to remember that product management as a field is still relatively young, right? So I knew early on, even at university, and I don't want to date myself necessarily, but I knew early on that I loved the power of technology to solve real problems. And that really sparked me working in a number of somewhat related fields that eventually morphed into product management. So I really started actually in the early days of digital, right? Like back then, it was all about like the digital presence. So I started early on building digital footprints for companies who were entering the landscape, be that through as a means of getting marketing presence or as a means of creating these retail experiences, etc. And then I just continued to building technology platforms and solutions, and eventually this became product as we know it today.
Sounds about right. I think I think that like rarely people who are product management managers right now started as product managers, so
Yeah.
that's a very common path. I also noticed that you call yourself a product nerd on your LinkedIn profile, which I found very cool. I loved that. I've never met before a product nerd. Uh, so I understand that this is because you fall in love in product management. Is that right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like even having this conversation with you today, I'm just like, giddy with excitement because it just gives us an opportunity to have this great dialogue about what product is and what product isn't. So I really do embrace this kind of like self-given title. But look, I really enjoy this field so much. And even when it's hard, and there are a lot of difficult aspects to it. So you mentioned kind of like demystifying it. Yeah, like we have to be talking about the things that are difficult about it too. And you know, trust me, like decision making is harder than people think because there's really like so many variables that can go wrong in anything you do. And another thing about product management is that people expect us to have all the answers when we simply don't know. So you know that said, I'm a lifelong learner, and this continuous curiosity is just what keeps me open to discovering new things across any number of topics, like related topics, like things like user research, team design, product strategy, and it really pushes me or it really kind of makes me push the boundaries of
Mhm.
where I can go. So I know that. I know that while this may make me a little bit of a boring person to have at parties, especially with people who aren't in product, because this is all the stuff I want to talk about, it is very motivating for me.
Come on, how product management could be not interesting, like on the parties
I
especially,
mean,
right?
that's what I think, but I don't know. We'll see. We'll have to take a poll of folks that I go to parties with and see what they think.
I'd rather not do the same poll across my friends, maybe just to be safe. But you mentioned a lot of topics that are kind of, hard about product management. So decision making, actually making the decision, but you don't know what's the right decision.
Right.
But also, I feel like when you talk and you also mention it, you're excited, you're in love with it. So what's this one thing that makes you fall in love with product management?
Yeah, that's a great question, and there's a number of different ways of answering that, especially kind of given my position and kind of where I've been in my career, right? Um, one of the things that I really love to do, and you'll see me talk a lot about, is just digging deep into like what users actually need, right? And this is the kicker, like this is the thing that is really important to understand about product, especially if you're not familiar with it. You're not looking at the world through the lens of your products. In other words, you don't see, for example, our DailyPay solution, which is in my opinion, humblest of opinions, a great product. I'm not looking at the world just through how somebody interacts with this product, right? But I'm really thinking about like what do they need in their lives? What does that ecosystem look like? And then figuring out how we play a role in that. And to me, that's like, I mean, come on, that's love at first sight right there. It's just figuring that out because it's highly nuanced. It requires a lot of work. It requires us challenging a lot of the assumptions that we have about things. So that's one part of it. The other part is around coaching and teaching others, right? Because I didn't know when I set off in my career, I didn't especially have aspirations to lead others, right? It wasn't one of those things that was kind of on my mental path. But over time, I realized that that's one of the most rewarding things that I can do. And when you do that, when you commit to that, you realize, most of your role becomes about managing and enabling others and teaching them what you know and growing along with them. Versus just what you do in kind of like your day-to-day role. So those things put together really, really just kind of was that secret sauce, secret formula for me.
Yeah, sounds very motivating, at least for me. I wonder, if you think about last years, which were, let's be honest, quite challenging.
Yeah.
What's there that you think about that made you, proud as a product manager? Is there anything like that?
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. I've been a part of this really incredible transformation at DailyPay. And the needs of our users have always been on the forefront, right? We could not have grown in the way that we did if that wasn't the case. But as you grow, that focus, like that having that cross functional, like everyone's kind of on board with this whole notion, doesn't always scale, right? So I've been really proud of how the cross functional teams here at DailyPay have come together around this. It's something that started really simple with the product team, but it's something that's really kind of grown, out of something small. So I'll give you an example of what I mean by that. So we listening to customers, even like, and this is a really simple example, but just to kind of like highlight a little bit of our journey. So we listen to support calls all the time, and we do that as a team. It's almost like mandatory for the product team to do that, and we pick up a lot of nuance in how folks think about the product. Now, sometimes when folks call in, there's friction, and we can learn from that as well. So that's not the only thing that we do, but as we started that practice, it became more and more evident that there's value in others in the organization to do that as well, and it's grown. And now we have this like company-wide event that we put together fairly regularly, which we call Coffee with Customers. And we have, we kind of really expose the user experience about the user experience across a number of different touch points. And, we have really great conversations, and we've become closer and closer. Like the level of that collective empathy that we have has really grown a lot. The other thing that I'm really proud of is, yeah, it was an interesting year, like every other year, but we lead with humility. We know that we don't always get it exactly right, and because we are leading with humility, we accept when we don't get it right, and we commit even more to getting it right. So it's been a really great year. I'm very happy with how far we've come.
I think that sounds like something to be very much proud of. Like, especially the first thing that you mentioned, like scaling the empathy within organization. I think it's
Yeah.
wow. And listening to the customers is one thing, but the other thing is talking to the customers, right? I think this is the topic that is like very out there. Everybody says go talk to your customers, like get out of the building. And on the other hand, that just get out of the building, talk to the customers, and ask, do you like my product? Do you like my idea? Like, how much would you pay for it, right? And it's like kind of not making the point. So I wonder, given the experience that you have, like getting
Mhm.
the insights from the customers and like making it into the product decisions, like what kind of tips do you have to like get the right insights from the customers, like listen right and talk to them right?
Yeah, I'm so glad that you asked that, and that you're kind of like shining a light on something, and you hit on something. You said something kind of like telling, which definitely triggered me a little bit. So in terms of uh, you know re- the role of research is important, right? And it's not important because you check the box and it's like, hey, I did research. It's because you're really understanding what people need, and again, you're not doing it from the lens of your product, right? So we have like direct and indirect ways that we learn about our users, right? Indirectly, I just mentioned, like, we listen to calls, but we also use capabilities such as full story to observe behaviors. And this is really important because this often shows us what users can't tell us and can't articulate. So that's just as important. But we also have these direct conversations with users as well, right? Like, we invest in one-on-one conversations, not only with our end users of our product, but remember, we're a B2B2C company, right? So we invest a lot of these conversations in companies that we work with. And for these conversations and these end users, I avoid at all costs, and
Mhm.
believe me, if I see this happening, you will get feedback from me, talking about our product. If you're having a conversation with a user, don't do it. When you're in front of them and you're in product, you're going to feel this like overwhelming desire to tell the user about how your product solves their need, right?
Mm.
Please don't do that. Like, I just cringe even thinking about it, right? So I might ask something like, well, how do you manage paying your bills on time? How do you feel? Like, there's a lot of emotion in this. Let's not hide from that. How do you feel a week before payday? And then I just listen, right? And I'm looking very carefully for the language that you're using, or they're
Mhm.
using, because that's really the goal. That's really where they're surfacing kind of like how they would explain it. On the employer side, or kind of like the companies that we work with, I really spend time, and I do spend time in front of those companies as well. And I encourage product people to do that. I spend time probing about like what their goals are, but I might do it in kind of like a slightly different way. For example, I might ask the contact or the representative of the persona that I'm focused on. I might ask them to write like a glowing year-end review. Like, what does that look like? Because remember, like, success doesn't always look like what you think it does. They may tell you, well, we really want to drive X, Y, and Z, but how they like almost like self-actualize is really important. So by asking them that, you can surface things that you wouldn't think that you could otherwise.
Great, great. I think it requires a lot of like understanding of the person that you talk to, right? To like get those emotions, get those insights, to ask the right questions. But we skipped a little bit the part about when you tell us first what DailyPay is doing on daily basis. Can we get into that? Like, can you share a little bit more about what daily pay products are about? What do you do there?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? It's in terms of what we do, it's actually a very simple concept, which usually the things that resonate most with folks can be very, very simple. And I'll tell you, I've loved the mission of this company from day one. It's something that I absolutely connected with. So, you know, In its simplest explanation, we allow people to get access to their wages as they earn them. It's very simple. You don't have to wait until payday to get access to the money that you've earned. And when you take a step back, you realize that the current financial system is really fraught with inefficiencies and friction, causing financial pain for everyone, right? Most notably, the American worker, and they earn money every day, but they have to wait to some scheduled payday to get access, right? So what we do is we provide the leading employers a financial wellness benefit for their employees. And a lot of what we've seen is really interesting because we've seen employee turnover reduce because of it. We've seen the use of things like or less favorable options such as like payday lending and things like that drop significantly. So it's really kind of a fun space to be in, but also an important space to be in.
Yeah. You mentioned some KPIs, metrics, if I get it right. Like, is it like data analytics, data insights? Is it something important that you use in DailyPay to like decide what to build?
Wow, I can go in so many different directions with that. I, I really can, right? So yeah, okay. I think if you allow me,
Go,
can I go a little bit in a slightly different direction and answer the question, but then kind of go into a different area?
go for it.
Awesome, awesome. I love it. You're so flexible with me. I appreciate that. And now you have a sense of how my mind works. Sometimes, the wheels are spinning. Um, okay, the short answer is that we're pretty obsessive here about looking for data and different metrics, and we do function and run our business, following company OKR. So we do have these mechanisms that help us to focus on the right outcomes to drive, right?
Mm.
And those things obviously help us, right? They obviously help us in terms of making those priorities. How much of that decision making are we looking, for this hard data, right? And these hard metrics versus how much of it is, something else, right? Am I on the right path there?
Yeah, I think so.
All right. So it kind of brings into the question, and I know that you and I have talked about this a little bit, like the role of like gut feeling, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So okay. So when and this is why I said, like, let me take a slightly different angle here for this. So when people start in product, they ask me a lot about, what books to read to learn about this thing called product management, right? And they're almost like looking for a manual of how to product. And sometimes in doing that, they can skip over some of the common sense basics, right? And we think like we can, process or book away a lack of this kind of like the direct experience that makes you a legitimate product person. And a lot of people, enter the field for any number of reasons, and that's cool. That's exciting, and I really enjoy that. But I have to stress that when you're looking for that early or kind of like in this process, you're always looking for the answers. You're looking like, how do I make decisions? How do I do X, Y, and Z? How do I, get something executed from, point A to point Z? And what I want to stress is like, books are here, there for inspiration, really, but they're not a manual, right? And they can influence, but they don't need to dictate. So this is really where the role of gut feeling or leveraging your gut feeling comes in, right? And it's almost taboo, right? Because when you see job descriptions for product people, guaranteed 10 out of 10 will say, hey, we're looking for like a data-driven approach, right? I think you're smirking because you know what I'm talking about, right? Like 10 out of 10 will say, we're looking for someone data-driven because that's where all the answers lie, right? And what you hear when you're in product management a lot is like, no, 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 ignore your gut. Like you need data and you need evidence. And I know this is a controversial thing to say, so I'll say it anyway. By doing that, are we actually doing people a disservice? Are we actually kind of like quieting something that people should be developing? They should be developing the sense of um, like decision making, like kind of like, hey, wait a minute, does that sound right? Does that kind of like sit right with me? Or maybe there's another element here that I've overlooked. So I think the over reliance on the data driven approach will lead you to believe that things are very obvious, right? That things are black and white. And if you if you do this step, right? If you read any book and say, hey, if you do this, then you'll know exactly the answer, right? Or if you do that, like, then this thing will happen. But the real product work, the real ideas, the real stuff, that's the fun stuff. It happens all in this like gray area, right? It's not in the black and white. So I really would encourage people to use their gut feeling a lot more, to pressure test some of the stuff that maybe the data is telling you, but it's not the only thing. And listen, I know, and I don't want anyone to walk away from here and say, oh my gosh, you said don't use data in decision making. Like, I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying, like, find that right balance.
Yes, I think you hit the right spot. And like the thought that I have in mind when you talk about the gray area, I think that if anybody is thinking about becoming product manager and hear about this gray area, whether it makes you scared or excited, this is kind of the indication if it's the path for you, because there's a lot of gray area in a product manager role.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we need to really embrace the gray area, right? And if you're someone who's not comfortable in the gray area,
Well,
maybe you should reconsider. I don't know.
But so you started talking about gut feeling, and another thing that is very like out there right now is product discovery, right? So doing everything that you can
Yeah.
to make sure that you're building the right product. So also the theme of our today's talk. So given that, and many books written about it, and on the other hand, having the gut feeling that we're talking about and gray area, what do you think, and whether it even exists, the ratio in making any product decisions on how much should it be driven by the data, the
Mhm.
customer insights, like the product discovery, how we know it, versus the gut feeling?
I don't I don't know that there's a prescribed ratio. Like, I couldn't tell you like definitively 80% is data and 20% is gut, because that's going to change. But you mentioned product discovery, and you made me think. Actually, I walked away from our first conversation and I thought, product discovery. Okay. So I had to go look it up, right? Because I mean, like, as a, look, listen, in product, we love concepts and we love terms, right? And when I take these kind of like concepts and break them down into the core components, I find that, wait a minute, this is really like kind of like what we've been doing anyway, right? But you mentioned product discovery, and you capitalize the P and you capitalize the D, right? Fantastic. So I'm like, this is a term. Maybe I'm missing something. Maybe I should know, how the world is talking about this right now, because there seems to be this kind of like resurgence of people talking about it. So, okay, I have to do my diligence here. So to break it down, I went to Product Plan. I don't know if you're familiar with that tool, but essentially they're a road mapping tool, but they also produce some pretty decent content about product. And here's the way they describe it. I'll read this. Hold on. Let me pull this up so I can read this. Okay. It says, this is a definition of product discovery. It includes developing a profound understanding of customers, then using that knowledge to build vital products for customers. Sorry. Product discovery plays a key role in helping product teams decide which features or products to prioritize and build, while setting the stage for achieving product excellence. Okay. That was what they wrote about. And I'm okay. So hang on. I was a little puzzled by this, Paula, I have to tell you.
Mhm.
So I can't help but ask, like, if this is like the must-have topic right now, what have we been doing all these years? I mean, doesn't it describe product management pretty succinctly? And with that point of view, then, kind of, what does that mean, right? And then what does that tell us? But I'll say this. Look, I talked a little bit about. I don't shy away from saying gut, or saying use your gut feeling. But by the same token, I don't have a formula either. And I think you need to um, make this learning about users and kind of like the kind of like balancing that emotional aspect with it with like what your business needs, and just keep practicing that, and then you will find that right ratio for you. And that's really, when I mentioned empathy, like it plays a massive role in you kind of like really refining that balance.
Hmm. That's great. So, right, linking to that, I feel like there's a lot of definitions about what product management is. Some says it's like product discovery and product delivery. Some says other stuff. A lot of frameworks, tools, influencing without authority, like a lot of buzzwords, some of them, but a lot of truth as well. I wonder if you could tell us what product management is about, like for you, in reality, not in the books, in theory, but for you.
Yeah. So as the VP of product, it's a little bit different. It's going to be a little bit different based on, kind of what level you're at.
Mhm.
Um, but a lot of the scope of my responsibilities is really thinking about, the product as a business, right? It's really thinking about, how does it drive, money? What are the expenses, associated? Kind of like think about it like a running a P&L, if you will, for the whole product line. Whereas sometimes a lot of folks think that it's just about, hey, we're going to create user stories, and then the engineers are going to go do that user story, and then the designers are going to develop. So that's actually, the more senior you become, that's not what product is about. You have to develop really that business sense to do it. But a lot of my work is around product planning, right? Which is, developing the strategy for the organization, looking at that landscape, looking at what users need, and then thinking, again, not from the lens of our products, but how
Mhm.
we might play a role and bring value there, right? So a big part of my role is defining what that is, finding those opportunities, and then taking that and then translating it to the organization, making sure we're getting buy-in from a number of different key folks, and then translating that for what it does mean, for the day-to-day work of the teams that I oversee. So, I play a role in helping them, to think about prioritization the right way, to really think about business outcomes the right way, so that they're empowered to make those decisions themselves. Because truth is, I'm not going to be there all the time, and nor do I want to be. This is you have to build these empowered teams, right? But I play a role then in that whenever that decision making takes place, and driving that visibility across the organization, so that people know what we are prioritizing, and to some degree, even more important, what we are not prioritizing. Um, and then, spend a lot of time in customer meetings, to make sure that, we are listening to what they need. When I say customer, I mean company, right? Because remember, in our case, we're a B2B2C company. And then the rest of my time, I really spend coaching and mentoring, and addressing obstacles that my team has. So both in their, professional development, as well as in the work that they do.
Mhm. From what you're saying, it is clear that you actually has a direct impact on how the product is going to look like what's the strategy, like where we're going with the product. And I wonder, how do you make sure that what you're saying to the teams, that how you enable them, empower them to build stuff, how do you make sure that this is actually building the right product?
Yeah, that's a good question. So yeah, so I think it's really, right is a relative term, right? And I think it's really important for you to understand, or product folks, the universal you, to understand, like, and ask yourself, like, right for who? And I know that in a lot of, these types of conversations, like that I personally have when I advise, or consult on these things, I know that I skew a lot towards, what the end user need is, right? And I firmly believe, like, look, if we know our users, then we will very clearly know how to build the right products for them. But um, a big part of product is around delivering on the company mission, driving real business results and influencing the strategic direction of the company, right? This is not the tail wagging the dog. So, I'd argue that, you know, I'd argue that you can't do that well. You can't define that right product, that kind of like meets all this criteria. Like I said, driving business results, et cetera, without having a mastery of what the user needs are, because you're the one who needs to like drive that perfect, that perfect marriage. And that could be at the individual user level, like your end users. It could be, if you're in a B2B business line, it could be, what those companies need. So this is one where I'd say, look at your results, look at your usage, look at your reviews, look at your support volumes. All these things have to be in concert, or work in concert as indicators of whether you're building the right product or not. I do notice a lot of people saying, tend to skew like, it's our customers will love us, our users will love us. They're gonna use it and it's gonna be great. But that's one aspect. What I'd argue here is like all those different components are the ones that you need to balance to figure out if you've driven the right product.
Yeah, and I think this is a very good summary of the answer for this question. Like, there's so many components that need to, at the end, come in balance, right? Like the business, the customers' needs, the users' needs, the pains. Yeah.
I would say, like, I'd add there, be clear. And, we try to do this as a practice, which is, obviously before we launch everything or put anything out, we are very clear about what we're measuring. But remember, you're not measuring the lagging indicators. Like revenue would be a lagging indicator because there's a number of different things that have to happen in your product before you see the revenue piece play out, right? So, the thing that I encourage my teams to do is for everything that you build, understand what your leading indicators are. In other words, like how do they interact with, this feature? What do we know about that interaction in terms of what it drives for the business, et cetera? Like there's a lot of like real hardcore work around that takes place and should take place.
Yeah. I think what you mentioned is like this ladder of the impact, starting from the company, then through the product, through the individual teams, which is very hard to map at the end. And maybe you can share your experience, like how an individual product team can make sure that they're doing something that's impactful for, at the end, the business, the product, the company.
So again, I think it's getting very clear on, and let me actually give you an example of how we manage that. So
Awesome.
We set OKRs at the company level. So we're always very clear about what we need to achieve, not just on the product side. Remember, OKRs are company level, which means that we need to kind of like fully embrace all the different components that are going to drive that, or drive results in that direction. So an important part for our teams is I never want them to feel like they're not connected to what we're trying to do as a business, right? So what we do is once we have that kind of like high level objective, we translate that into what are the indicators and the metrics and the results that we need to drive as a team, and that's fundamentally what the OKR framework is, right? To give us a sense of certainty, right, that we are aligned and driving the right things. And you don't always get it right? Like even though you may have a metric around engagement, or we want to drive this particular metric in our business from X to Y, you don't always get the methodology right, or you don't always get the ideas that are going to support that right. But it gives you that framework. And I think when you go back to that framework, it opens you up to understand, like finding the things that are going to be most impactful to drive that number. Does that make sense?
It does a lot. Like another question popped to my mind. So I think like making sure that a team, we build something that's impactful and making sense and valuable for the company, for the customer, is something that is very motivating. Like I think the most motivating, right, for the product teams. The OKRs, the frameworks that show like how it all goes together, is one thing to visualize it. Is there anything else that you use in your role to keep the motivation going in the product teams?
Yeah. Yeah, I do, because people aren't always motivated just by results, right? And one of the key skills that I look for in all product folks when I'm hiring or when I'm developing them and coaching them is storytelling. And the reason that I drive that so much is because when you those are those are the intangibles that keep people very interested and very driven. So let me give you an example of what I mean by that, because stories really help us connect to the work that we do, right? And I'm going to give you two versions of something,
Mm-hmm.
and I want you to tell me which one resonates most with you.
Okay.
Okay? Okay, version A is, we want it to be clearer how much of your earned wages you can access now. Okay? Version A. Nothing fundamentally wrong with that. That has an implication of a metric, right? That has a data point that you can track, or you can have leading and trailing indicators on that. Okay, great. Or B, okay, is, okay, imagine that you're someone getting ready for work and you don't have a lot of time, and you're rushing to get to your car to make it on time to your job, right? But you're in the car, and you look at the gas meter and you realize you don't have enough to get to work, right? And you can't be late. Right. And then, of course, we can make it a little more dramatic if you want, like, but, darn it, gas prices are high right now, and you're not sure you have enough in your bank account. Right. So the pressure's mounting. You're feeling kind of like your chest tighten a little bit because you're not sure, what are you going to do? You got to get to work. You cannot be late. But then you remember that you worked 4 shifts, for, from since your last paycheck, and that, DailyPay can help you that access those funds so that you can get the gas, you can pay for that, and you can be at work at time, right? And so A or B?
No, obviously B. I felt the pressure of getting on time to my work. So
Yeah. So imagine that, people ask me, well, how do you teach empathy? I'm like, you have to help people connect with these real stories and these real situations. It's essential. It's essential in product, not just product, and engineering design. Like I kind of like say product like the universal product right here. And if you're not able to connect um, to a real person's needs, which is what storytelling helps you to do, you're going to be very tempted to look at the problem from your eyes, not
Mhm.
their, right? So this is where sometimes I see folks jump in and say, "Hey, you know what? We just need to educate them on how the product works. Like we need to educate them better on how the product works." And they just don't understand. And if I tell you that story and you can somehow put yourself in the shoes of that person,
Mhm.
remember that pressure mounting? That felt real, right?
Yeah.
Then the last thing that you're going to recommend as a product solution here, as a user experience solution, is like a tutorial, because that person doesn't have time to go watch it. So I share that because there's of course the data and the metrics and the results and all this stuff, but you got to pair that with this other motivation, because that's really what's going to wake you up every morning and find a lot of meaning in your work.
Mhm. I think that's very true. Thank you for sharing that. Like, great story, by the way. But it's also like another question comes to my mind. So we talked about like the what people think that product management is in theory, what it really is. And I can imagine like very common scenario for a product manager when you're like actually have all those theory in the back of your mind, but you're like there in the office faced with a huge product decision that's going to impact your company's business, and how much of your thinking is on the methodologies and frameworks versus something else. And I
Yeah.
wonder, you mentioned also like the storytelling, but if you were to say like what's the crucial skill of the product manager that is super important in such
Mhm.
situations and other that are very common, what would you say it is?
Yeah, yeah. So we lean heavily on developing hypotheses. right?
Mm-hmm.
So when we learn something or we get some kind of insight or we do have that empathy, uh, or we looked at data points and kind of like brought all these things together to kind of like make these assessments. We make sure to write it down. We write down why we think something's happening. So that ability to kind of like develop a hypothesis, and I'm not talking about a hypothesis that's, if we drive more people to this page, there will be more people who interact with this page. That's not like a true hypothesis, right? You have to really really refine the skill to write down, why, like, why do we think this is happening, etc. So what we do as a team to kind of like help us on this path is we get really clear on the steps to validate each hypothesis that we come up with. And not only do we get clear on that and write it down, this is important. Like if like I'm very specifically repeating, write it down because it can't live in your head. Like, please, like that is a misconception. Don't let anyone tell you that. Write it down. It's really important. And then we also write down what we need to learn at each phase about like that capability or that hypothesis, right? So let me give you an example. We did a pilot recently where there's a new product that we're exploring. And we're not going to go build this new product with all these bells and whistles and all this stuff and just put it out in the marketplace and say, hey, ta-da, here we are. So we're very careful about doing this and about defining the hypotheses. So we created a recent pilot, right, like a prototype. And we created this chart that had like the capabilities that we were thinking about, including in the pilot, and then in the next column, and I'm getting very granular here, right? Like this is what makes me a product nerd, I guess. In
Yeah.
the next column, we wrote like what what we hope that this teaches us and how that validates our hypothesis. And by doing that, what we were able to do is prioritize those things and saying, well, what's the most important thing for us to learn right now?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So out of the gate, it wasn't necessarily going to be like, hey, is somebody going to pay us X, Y, and Z for this? Out of the gate is just, well, we're really trying to see like, is will someone even use it, right? So then
Mm-hmm.
you prioritize those hypotheses, and then that kind of give us a sense of, okay, we're going to build these two things, very lightweight way to kind of get to the MVP. We're clear on what we're going to learn from each step here and what
Mm-hmm.
we validate, and then we go and we work with potential users or pilot users to learn that, and as we check those off, then it helps guide the next set of work.
I think like using the experiments and writing the hypothesis, I think it's something that seems very easy on paper because it's like two words, two sentences, or how you're going to validate, how you're going to measure, and just look at the results.
Mhm.
But then what you're just saying is like the essence of it, right? Like what makes it so like this gray area, kind of difficult.
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing, you don't have the answers. That's what the gray area is. The gray area is you not having the answers. So what we try to do is we try to like de-risk this. And we do
Mm-hmm.
that by breaking it down into like, no, we're not going to answer 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. What we really just need to know right now is number 2. Right. And then we're very specific about how we do that. And then we meet weekly to revert back what we learned. And what evaluate what our next steps are going to be. So it is a little bit of a process. You don't always have the luxury of doing that. Like there are cases with like an end user product where you can throw some stuff out there, test it, and then pull it back. There's less risk associated with that. But when you're dealing with, for example, like we were in this case, a B2B product, you want to kind of like take those steps to validate along the way. It is hard to do. I don't want it. Sorry, I don't want to make this sound overly easy, right? But we do get very tactical with some of this stuff, and that just helps the process along.
I feel like also like what naturally goes with experimentation and validation is that sometimes you fail, sometimes you're wrong. And this is also something that people find difficult. We're not, educated and we're not schooled to fail. And I wonder if you could share some of the experiences of anybody that comes to your mind, or any hypothesis that was validated as wrong, that kind of like stuck in your mind, that you thought it's for sure this is right, and thanks to the research, thanks to like the approach that you shared.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. I can think of actually one example.
Mm.
Although I have I have a lot of comments on what I wish we would teach people about this kind of extreme desire to always find the solution, right?
Mhm.
But we'll leave that for later. So DailyPay is a really simple product, and again, its power is in the simplicity, and we give people access to their money as they earn it. Okay, great. So one would assume that the reason that they come to DailyPay is to get access to their money as they earn it, right? Okay, we didn't take a massive leap there, like that just is common sense. And we started really digging and investigating, because I'm always trying to learn, like, what are people actually doing, and the research started to surface that uh, a lot of people were coming and not getting access to their money. And I said, wow, but it's such a simple product. Like, why, what else are they doing here? So we kept digging, we kept looking at the data. We looked at full story. We had surveys. We did, we really wanted to cover this. And one of the biggest surprise that we thought, and this was not my initial hypothesis, was that actually people are coming because they want control over the pay. They just want to see their pay accumulate. They want to manage their shifts. They want to know how this is contributing to how much money they're going to have at payday. It's this means of like control and planning, etc. So that actually took our product thinking in an interesting direction. And without really revealing too much, I have to be kind of cautious too. I still have some things that are not live. It's really inspiring and influencing how we think about our product and the role that our product plays in people's lives.
Wow, it's very inspirational. Like to really dig into what's behind what you think is out there. Well, congrats on getting such insightful stuff.
Oh, it's been so great. And it just, like I said, just leads us down to ask the next question. Well, I wonder why that is. And then you ask the next question, and I wonder why that is. And then you find yourself actually, even internally, having a different relationship with your user.
Mm-hmm. Great. How about we go into some questions that we got from the audience?
Yeah.
One we have about how to understand or measure that my idea or product is market fit or not.
That's a good question, right? Because one of the things, like one of the early things that you want to understand is, like, do we have product market fit? If you don't have product market fit, it makes very little sense to continue to invest in a very meaningful way. But product market fit doesn't always reveal itself in the way that you think, right? And you need to kind of become comfortable. Um, uh, you need to become comfortable in pivoting, like if that's the case. Like, it's okay. Like, it's okay if if you realize something and you're ready to shift. So um I mentioned earlier kind of like the process that we take, kind of like where we like do like a pilot, right? And then we're very clear, we write the hypotheses and what we want to learn, etc. I think that's actually one of the most essential things that we get to understand is our product market fit. So what are the fundamental questions of product market fit? Well, do people need it? Will they use it? And will they pay for it? Right? So those are all the kinds of things that you can address in an early way, and sometimes you don't even have to build an actual product in order to do that. I'll tell you, this didn't happen at DailyPay, but there I was going through the same exploratory process at another company to discover that for this new product line that we were thinking about launching. And it
Mhm.
started very simply. We took out Facebook ads. We pretended that the product was live, and we took out Facebook ads to see like how many people interacted with it. And that was our first indicator. And oh, by the way, the results were we got like more than double the level of interaction that we get that we normally got through our Facebook ads. And then it's like, okay, well, that's interesting. Now about what? Like, do we just reposition something or build like a clunky way and see like, will people interact with it? And it's almost like you start layering these things before making these massive investments in it, to determine that. The other thing is, and I don't, I hope I'm not, betraying my fellow product professionals, but you should feel experiences. You got to build a business case too. And by doing that, that's going to help you make your argument and understand, like, is the addressable market there? Like, what other options are there in the marketplace today that solve this need? Oh, and by the way, I just remembered something else. Please, 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 please get very clear and crisp and articulating what need you're actually solving for. Right? Because if you don't have clarity on that, and you're like, and it solves this need, and it solves that need, and it solves this other need, and you try going after all of those, you're not going to learn what you need to learn. So in this path to product market fit, spend the time to articulate that, get clear on that. And then you'll know if you're validating. But that also applies to, or feeds into, the building a business case, right? Because to get to the total addressable market, you need to understand what else solves the problem. And I'm not saying direct competitors. This is like totally jobs to be done. Like, what else solves the problem? That's what's really going to reveal your opportunity.
I think that's another answer that shows us like how many components are playing a role in product being successful, and that it starts from
million. It feels so overwhelming at times. So like that really resonates with me, because it does feel very overwhelming at times. It's like, well, do I do this? Will that reveal the answer? Do I do that? Will that reveal the answer? And the question is yes and no. Like, you can answer yes to all, and you can answer no to all of those, right? So it's just finding that right combination of things that it's really going to like help you understand, or help guide your next few steps.
So another question that we have is from Tomasz, and he says that I've learned today that Hilton is piloting DailyPay, allowing employees to track and access their earned wages daily. And his question is, can you share a bit of insights about such pilot projects? How much work preparation is needed on your side? Do you need to personalize the experience for each partner, Hilton in this case? What's the most fun part? What's the most challenging part?
Okay, wow, that covered a lot of ground. So let's break this down a little bit, right? And remind me, what was that second part of that question? Around the customization, because I want to address that first.
Yeah. So how much work preparation is needed on your side? Do you need to personalize the experience for each partner?
Okay. So I've had this position for a long time as a product leader about avoiding customization, especially when working in the B2B space and you're working with big strategic partners. Now, you might be asking yourself, hey, sometimes we're working with some very, very large, important strategic partners, and they're going to dictate certain things, and that may involve customization. But by and large, as a rule, I try to push the organization towards the ability to customize, but the ability to customize those things that contribute to the core value and core differentiator of our product. So sometimes you'll find that when working with strategic partners, they may want you to customize certain elements or personalize certain experiences, and you're not entirely sure why. So I think you need to understand, like, what are they actually driving for? But what they may not realize or may not see is that that's to the detriment of the actual product itself and the user experience. So I feel a great responsibility for us to kind of share and show the employee experience. In this case, right? I'm giving an example. To show why that may cause friction, or why that may cause confusion, why that may be in conflict with the ultimate value that we're trying to drive here. And for the most part, we've been pretty successful in doing that. But by the same token, we we would work with a partner or a customer, as you mentioned, to really understand, well, what are you actually trying to achieve? We don't necessarily take some of these requests at face value. It's like, oh, well, this we really want this word to be this versus that.
Mm-hmm.
Help me to understand why. Like, we don't say no out of the gate. We really try to understand why. And oftentimes it could be things like, well, we just need it to resonate with how we talk about this here, or, it's something like that. And there's so many different solutions that you can come up with that don't have to be product solutions, but still get you to that same outcome. Like, you can create a landing page that says, like, if you call your employees associates and you want us to call people associates, could we maybe have an email or have a landing page or something that, again, is not very disruptive. So that's kind of a long-winded answer, but I wanted to address that.
Yeah, I think like another congrats, right, on making it all work. Like on one hand, like many products at some point get just busy with all the feature requests from different customers. And if what you're saying is that you kind of managed to keep the product within the strategy that you have and keep the customers happy, I think this is like win-win.
Well, and let me stress the importance of something like a customer advisory board. Like, we actually bring our customers in and we have discussions with them about products and about their needs. And I find that oftentimes, like, the conversations aren't about a product feature or I wish it did this better or I wish it did that. Like, of course, that feedback comes to us and we're always listening to it. And we have to like put that together and decide. You go through your prioritization process like you would otherwise. Right. But we invite them into a partnership with us. Right. So that we can understand like what they're trying to achieve and how we can be a trusted advisor to them in achieving that. And sometimes product's part of that conversation and sometimes it's not.
There, I think we're getting to the end of the episode.
Wow, that was fast.
Right. We have 2 minutes, and I have one last question for you. A question that we're asking. Don't get nervous at the end.
I know.
That's the easiest one.
Okay.
So this is the one that we're asking all the guests, and it's about the magic wand. So if you could cast a spell that would allow you to provide education on a specific topic to all 12 years old around the world, like what would it be? What would you want them to learn?
Okay. I kind of alluded to this earlier, but I kind of want to dive a little bit deeper into this. We prize people who come up with great solutions in life, the ones with like the winning ideas. But those ideas don't always come out of like thin air. And if they do, and that does happen sometimes, we call that luck. So if I had a magic wand, I would teach all the young folks out there to stop trying to find solutions for everything. And we need to teach them how to get very good at understanding and articulating the need, right? Like the actual thing that they're trying to solve or the opportunity. And this is way easier said than done. Okay, I'm not minimizing that, but and it's actually the reason that it's hard to do is because we want to answer those questions. We really want to find solutions. And look, product managers can easily fall in love with their ideas. That's I'm guilty of that. Guilty as charged, right? So no judgment here. But we have to be careful of that because in the rush to find that solution, there's some things that we miss. Like, should we be doing this at all? We can't really answer that until we're clear on what the problem is, right? And then we invite scrutiny and challenge it, right? And part of inviting scrutiny means that, hey, you're going to get questioned a lot. You're going to get challenged. So learn how you're going to handle that situation. Because in product, my goodness, I don't need to tell you, right? Like, it happens all the time. So really, don't rush to find that solution. Get really clear on what you're solving. Keep an open mind in terms of all the different ways that you can do that, and invite scrutiny into the process. You might be surprised at what you discover along the way.
Great way to end the episode. Thank you there so much for the talk. It was a pleasure for me. I hope it was also fun for you.
Always fun. And you made it fun. So thank you for that.
Awesome. I'm glad. And thanks everybody who's listening. So the episode is going to be available on the podcast as well. And actually, this episode is the last one before the summer break. So we're going to be back in September. Thanks again, Dara. Thanks everybody for listening, and see you next time.
Thank you all. It was a pleasure.